Welcome to the beginning of what will be a 7-week series on the 10 Commandments. So 10 becomes 7, right? It's a good holy number there. But we're trying to do this before Easter starts. And this program, as you may know, is called Rise Above It. It's about using these commandments, looking at a deeper sense of them to rise above the ordinary problems of life. And in my research as to what to tell you about this first commandment, which you probably know is don't have any other gods before me, I came across a sermon by Glenn Alden that I thought was really, really good. So most of what you're going to hear today is stuff that Glenn wrote. I've adapted it a little bit, but overall this is his sermon, and I just feel like this is something that was worth sharing. And so I've already told Glenn, thanks, I'm stealing your sermon. Appreciate that very much. And next time you see him or see him on Facebook, if you like this, you can tell him. Thank you. So he starts off with a story. He says, there was a woman, Sandra, and Sandra forced a smile on her face as she waved at the school bus driving off down the road with her 3 children in it. But after it pulls away, she turned and buried her face in her hands and ran sobbing back into the house. What happened, she said. What happened here? What's going on? This was supposed to be a great day. This was the first day of school, and it was supposed to be special for her children. They'd done all the shopping, they'd gotten all the clothes out, but that morning, the kids were distracted. The kids were annoying. They wouldn't wear the clothes that were picked out, and they didn't want to eat the breakfast, and they were late, and they had barely made the bus. And so Sandra just lost it. And so the thought comes into her mind. You know, hey, if only those kids had done what I told them to do and what I wanted them to do, everything would have been fine. And then she's like, you know what? I'm the adult here. And she thought back, had this memory of the day when she stood with her husband at the church when the baby was baptized, and she thought about the dreams she had of being a mother and how she would always keep her children's best interest at heart and offer them unconditional love and model for them what a loving, patient, kind, and supportive God would be, the same kind of God she wanted in her life. So what happens? She says, well, as I thought about this, came as like a flash of insight. She says that morning she realized she'd been so preoccupied with what other people would think about her. Every choice she made about what her children were going to wear and show up with, and the supplies they brought into school, the way they would excel, what was underpinning all of that was this desire to impress all the other parents, to impress the teachers with what a good parent she is. And it's like, with that, she realized the God she was worshiping is, what do other people think of me? What do other people think of me? She's like, I was willing to sacrifice my children's lives, their self-esteem, their sense of fun and play, and anything like that in order to have that good presentation put forward to the world so that the world can see what a great mom I am. Worshipping other gods. It's a good example of it. Exodus chapter 20, we have the first of the commandments. We'll just read these first 6-7 verses here. God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them, or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. When the children of Israel made it to Mount Sinai, they watched Moses go up the mountain And they were so terrified by God and the thunder and the shaking of the mountain that they really wanted Moses between God and them. It's like, you know what, you go deal with the guy in the mountain. We'll just stay here. We are fine. And yet it's interesting to note that it didn't take very long, a few weeks, before they'd forgotten all about the fear of God. They'd forgotten about Moses, forgotten about how he brought them out of Egypt. All that stuff's gone. And so what do? Well, they fill the emptiness with something else. In this case, it was the golden calf, right? We're going to make our own God. And I find that interesting because how often it is that we do that same thing, where it's like if God isn't standing right next to us shouting, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, that we forget that he's here. And we say, oh, well, he's not here, so, well, must go do something else. It's like we see it today with the kids and how we absorb in our screens, because we all just got to have input. And we're the same, right? If we don't see God constantly slamming us with input, must not be there. Must not be there. But that's why this commandment comes up number one. Swedenborg will tell us in his principles for understanding the inner sense of things is that whatever comes first in a series is the most important. So the first day of creation is the most important. The first miracles that Jesus does is important. Things like that. And therefore, the first commandment is super important. And today, we think it's largely irrelevant for most of our lives because we don't go around worshiping statues. Nobody goes home after church, says, oh, you know what, I'm bored. I'm going to make a little wooden carving and I'm going to worship that. We just, we don't do that. And that's how most people would just read it literally and see that. But we do give power to other things out there. There are all kinds of things out in the world that we allow to control our feelings, to control our thoughts, and what ends up being controlling our very life. There are all sorts of things we do because we think, I'm not as happy or elated as I could be at the moment, so I'm going to go do this other thing instead. Think of all the things that we allow to control our emotions. Self-pity, right? We can get into that one pretty easy. Discouragement, hopelessness. Of course, there's the other side of it. You could be angry, contempt, selfish, right? There are all sorts of things like, despising other people, saying, well, these people are bad and I'm better than they are. And they should know that, right? It's so easy to get into some of those emotions that manipulate our life. And these emotions have a way of changing us and controlling us in a way that is just very unhealthy. We sacrifice who we want to be in order to satisfy kind of a passing thought, a passing feel-good moment. Oh, I'll feel really good if I tell this person what I really think of them. But that's not really the person we want to be. So we sacrifice that. We worship this other God, right? This can happen in other forms too. A very common form of worshiping another God can come in forms of substance abuse, right? How many of us have had a bad day and hit the freezer and just gorged on some ice cream? So, you know what, I am in the dumps. This whatever didn't work out real well. How about some cake and ice cream? Yes, please. Thank you very much. Some people go shopping. We call it retail therapy, right? It's kind of a form of substance abuse, even though it's not really a substance in some ways. But, with the ice cream idea, to me, I look at it and go, well, there's nothing inherently wrong of having that moment. Having a bad day, you want to grab some ice cream, perk yourself up, that's fine. But where this goes wrong is when we start saying, well, I'm going to bed tonight. What am I going to eat tomorrow? What am I going to have tomorrow? And then we wake up in the morning, we go, oh, I had that. And then it becomes, gee, what can I do else? What else can I eat today? And, this is getting a little unhealthy and I'm getting a little embarrassed. I got to make sure I do this on the side. Make sure that, when I go to McDonald's and get that chocolate ice cream cone, nobody knows because it's getting a little embarrassing. It's gotten control of me. So we start having this stuff take control of us. Nobody sets out to be an ice creamaholic. Nobody sets out to be addicted to cigarettes. Nobody sets out to be a drug user, a junkie, or an alcoholic. Nobody sets out taking their first drink thinking, boy, can't wait to be an alcoholic, right? It just doesn't happen. But it does happen where we get there. We go to that place where we think this substance is what's going to make me happy. And that's having that false God. So we have to be on guard and being honest with ourselves as to what we're sacrificing and what we're getting. Because key to this whole thing is the Lord's commandment saying, I am the God who brought you out of what? Slavery, out of bondage, right? I am the one who's going to set you free. All these other things that you're doing are going to do what? Put you in their handcuffs. They're going to make slaves out of you. So it can be all sorts of things, not just substances, right? You know, what are the other ideas that can get to us? Well, obsessive thoughts. We can obsess over something, saying, a thought gets in my head, and we go around and around and around and around, and it enslaves you. And what I see happening today is that we kind of get these obsessive thoughts that make us God. We worship kind of ourselves in some ways. What about the people who obsess over the news, right? There are people who get very much drawn into knowing what's going on in the world. And there's this one friend that Glenn writes about. He says, he feels like he's got a responsibility to know all these things that's going on in the world and a responsibility to fix them. Or at least figure them out in his mind so much that he can influence his friends as to how they should think and how they should vote and how they should see all these things that are going on in the world. Now, apparently this guy listens to NPR, National Public Radio, obsessively. And he says that NPR is this guy's God. He says, I'll go to bed in the morning. I'll go into bed saying tomorrow morning I'm going to get up. I'm going to get to work. I'm going to start doing my chores at 5:30. I'm going to walk the dogs. Going to get all this stuff done. But apparently what this poor fellow does is on his alarm is he has it going to NPR. So he wakes up to NPR and he starts listening to it. Oh, well, listen, gets distracted. Dogs don't get walked. Chores don't get done. And, next thing you know, hour goes by, he's been listening to all the stories, and now the stories are starting to repeat because NPR just is like this news cycle, so it just goes around, and he's going, what am I doing? I have lost my time. I have lost the stability. And this is exactly why these things should be seen as slavery, because that's what they do. They steal from us. Oh, they give us some fun, they give us some pleasure in the moment, but they steal from us our time. They steal from us our creativity. They steal from us the ability to do the stuff that would actually make us truly happy. So as you sit there and you think about these different things that we think are going to make us happy, it serves us well to stop and think about, well, what is it that we would be doing if we weren't following these other gods? What would we be doing if we actually did the things that the Lord asked us to do? Well, maybe we'd go for a walk, for a hike. Turn off the brain for a while. Turn off those things and enjoy nature and just let thoughts come into us. Maybe we would find some satisfaction in work. We'd find a hobby where we can build something, create something, change some things. And we find great satisfaction in those things. There are people who get assigned community service hours for one reason or another. And they actually come back saying, hey, you know what? I actually really enjoyed that. I was actually doing something productive. I was contributing to society. This wasn't actually punishment. This was a way to see my life differently of what I could be doing instead of doing all the things that I normally do. Maybe this isn't so bad. Work has power in it. Work has power in it. Hopefully you'll see that after church when we do a working bee. Work has power in it. Hopefully you get something good out of it. So the idea is to start thinking about how life could be if we traded in our false god for the real one. And we're not doing it because, we want everybody to see how great we are at the wonderful things we do. We're doing it because we're trying to be a blessing in somebody else's life. You pick up the trash on your walk. You think, okay, well, somebody else will appreciate going through this same walk and not seeing trash on the ground. Hey, everybody wins, right? When we observe the commandments, we actually benefit ourselves and other people as well. This is God's way of enhancing our relationship with Him. If we look at the other reading we have for today from Secrets of Heaven, it gets into how this works. It says, "You shall not have other gods before my face," means that there must be no thoughts about truths from any source other than the Lord. This is clear from the meaning of gods as truths, and in the contrary sense as falsities, and from the meaning of face in a reference to God's face as love, mercy, peace, and goodness, thus the Lord Himself, since the Lord is the source from which these things spring. The reason, this is the important part, the reason why there must be no other gods before my face means that there must be no thought about truths from any source other than the Lord, because the Lord must be first in line and must reign universally in each individual truth that follows. Consequently, the commandment now declares such things as are to be avoided because they are thoroughly destructive and prevent the Lord from reigning universally in each and every truth contained in the commandments and the statutes that were dictated and commanded from Mount Sinai. The first thing that would be destructive is the thought about truths from a source other than the Lord, which is meant in the words that prohibit the presence of other gods before the Lord's face. Basically, it's saying if you have other gods in your life, you're preventing Lord coming in, and that's destructive, right? You just have a very simple process. You put another god in the way, the Lord's teachings don't get to us. So if you're doing the ice cream binge, if you're doing the drugs or the alcohol or too much work, too much worry, too much anxiety, whatever it is that God, too much NPR, whatever it is you've put in that place, you're not letting the one true God into your life. You set up a blockade, and you're missing out on the blessings that would be there instead. We call these campaigns journey campaigns because, well, the first one done was about the journey from Egypt into Exodus. The book was called The Journey. So when we've done these subsequent ones, they've all picked up this nickname that it's a journey campaign. And yet, while the Ten Commandments isn't a journey in that literal sense, it's not talking about a progression from one place to another, it is talking about a journey of going through these various states, of raising yourself higher. This is the idea with our story at the beginning. Sandra, she gets in touch with, at least on some level, about who she is. Getting in touch with the idea of what she's willing to sacrifice for what she's willing to get. And in this case, she was realizing she was sacrificing her children's happiness in childhood for her own self-image. I can't imagine that would have been a terribly pleasing revelation for her. That must have been quite the bummer to go, oh boy, am I really that kind of a parent who's sacrificing my kids' happiness for me? It's hard. It's hard. And it's hard to go through this process of self-examination because, well, we want to be happy, but in order to be happy, we have to say, uh-oh, the God I'm worshiping isn't the real one, and therefore, I've screwed up, I've failed, I've messed up. That brings me down, but I want to be happy, so what do? Do you bring out the chocolate? Do you get out the ice cream again? Or, well, what? And I think what we have to understand is that the Lord says, no. I have brought you to this point. I'm going to keep bringing you out, and I will always be bringing you out. And that's not just a cute turn of phrase there. That's actually what the Hebrew indicates. Apparently, so we have this commandment that says that I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery, out of the house of bondage. But the word, it's used in Hebrew for brought, apparently has this levels of meaning. It's not just a brought, it's about the God who has brought, is bringing, and will forever bring you out. So when you read that commandment, it's not just about something that's happened in the past. I'm the God that has brought you out of this house of slavery, is bringing you out of this house of slavery, and will always be bringing you out of the house of slavery. So we're on a journey, and God's trying to get us there. And He's going to bring us out every step of the way. So, yeah, it's hard. It's hard, but we let go and say, all right, I'm powerless. I will let God do this for me. I'll let Him bring me out. God doesn't lose, so you got a really good advantage right there as soon as you give up to that. And that way, it allows us to rise above it and be the person that we want to be. There's a story about a man who didn't believe in anything much. He didn't believe in God, he didn't believe in the afterlife, and he sure as heck didn't believe in any 10 commandments given up to Moses on the mountain. And so one day his friend comes to him and says, well, do you believe in God? He's like, oh, come on, you know better. Of course not. That's ridiculous. Well, how about spirituality? Do you believe in any of that? Do you believe there's a spiritual side to life? He says, oh, I don't think so. He says, well, what is it that you'd be willing to die for? What is it that you're willing to sacrifice for? What is it that is the most important thing in your life? Man goes home, gives it a real think. Well, you think, well, is it money? No, I don't want it to be money, and I'm not going to let it be money. No, it's not that. That's it. And as he contemplates this, he's realizing this is harder than he thought. Because it's really important to know, what is it that we value more than anything else? What is it that we would die for? And God's asking us that same question. What is it that you value most? What is it you're willing to sacrifice some part of your life for? Well, God's asking us to get in touch with the obstacles that stand in the way of being the person you want to be. What is it that's preventing you from getting out of the house of bondage? Because the Lord will bless us in all things, but we have to make room in our hearts for it. He's asking us to look at them and name them. Oh yeah, this is it. Sacrificing my kids so that I look better. Oh, you know what? It's me wanting to be right and show everybody else I'm right, and contempt on those fools who don't see it. Right? Oh yeah, that's hard. Naming our false gods. It's part of the job here. And we got to keep that in front of us and keep working on that. It's a big deal for the children of Israel. It's a big deal for us. And as you look at the Old Testament, the history that goes on there, what's the sin that keeps cropping up over and over and over again? This one right here. Other gods. How many times do they pull out a false god and worship it? It's like the big thematic element across the Old Testament that everybody misses. And you think, what's the thing they screw up the most? Where do they disobey the most? Oh, murdering people or coveting or whatever, they do this, that, the other. No, worshiping false gods. It's the number one commandment for a reason, because we're all prone to it. Back then and today as well. It may not be a wooden carving or a glass figurine, but it is something that we do. And I think if you really start to dig down on it, what comes down to is that often why we fail in this regard is because we have fear. We have fear that we don't have any value. We have a fear that we're a nobody. We have a fear of not being able to contribute, those kind of things. And so God's trying to say, hey, I have an answer for you here. I have an answer. You've got to see that you've got a false god on your hands. And it's blocking you from getting the blessings I have to offer you. Seeing it, naming it, it's all part of the process. It's part of the examination. But that's what this program's about. Inviting you to put those aside, go on a journey, go to somewhere new, put that false god aside, and let a new one rule in your heart. Amen.